The morning alarm on the Draxian flagship sounded like a scream. Taman jerked awake in his narrow bunk, hitting his head on the metal ceiling above him. He rubbed his forehead and groaned. 3 months on this alien ship, and he still wasn't used to the cramped quarters. He climbed out of bed and looked around his small room. It was barely large enough for a bed, a desk, and a locker. The walls were made of some dark purple metal that the Draxians loved. Everything on this ship was purple or black. Taman missed the bright colors of Earth. He got dressed in his work uniform, a plain gray jumpsuit with a small Earth flag patch on the shoulder. The patch was the only thing that showed he was human. Among the tall, blade-limbed Draxians who ran this ship, he needed that reminder. He was far from home. Taman grabbed his toolkit and headed to the maintenance deck. The corridors were mostly empty at this hour. A few Draxian soldiers passed him, their 4 eyes tracking his movement with suspicion. Humans were still new to the Galactic Coalition. Most aliens didn't trust them yet. The maintenance deck was in the lower section of the ship where all the dirty work happened. Taman's job was simple: fix whatever broke, stay quiet, and don't ask questions. He was one of 30 humans assigned to different alien ships as part of the Cultural Exchange Program. It was a fancy name for cheap labor. He didn't mind. Taman loved fixing things. Back in Busan, he had worked in his mother's repair shop, fixing everything from old computers to broken kitchen appliances. His mother always said he had magic hands. He could look at something broken and just know how to fix it. The workstation was cluttered with broken equipment. A cracked display screen, a damaged air filter, and a malfunctioning food processor waited for him. Taman set down his toolkit and got to work. His hands moved quickly, almost without thinking. Unscrew this panel. Reconnect that wire. Replace this chip. Within an hour, all 3 items were working again, but Taman was restless. He finished his assigned work too quickly, and his shift wasn't over for another 6 hours. He looked around the maintenance deck. There had to be something else to fix. That's when he saw it. In the corner behind a stack of supply crates, there was a door. It was marked with Draxian symbols he couldn't read. Taman knew he shouldn't go exploring. Humans weren't supposed to wander around the ship. But curiosity pulled at him. He walked to the door and pressed the access panel. To his surprise, it opened. The lock must have been broken. Inside was a large room filled with equipment. Not just any equipment, this looked important. Everything was neatly arranged on display stands, polished and perfect. Taman stepped inside, his eyes wide. There were weapons on the walls, all gleaming under soft lights. There were helmets and shields. And in the center of the room, on a raised platform, stood a suit of armor. It was beautiful. The armor was made of interlocking plates that shimmered between purple and silver. Ancient symbols were carved into every surface. This wasn't just armor. This was art. Taman walked closer, drawn to it like a magnet. He wasn't supposed to be here. He knew that. But he couldn't help himself. He had to look. As he got closer, he noticed something. One of the chest plates had a slight discoloration. His engineer's eye caught it immediately. He leaned in, studying the armor more carefully. There, the energy regulator was positioned wrong, and those connection points looked stressed, like they were carrying too much power. His fingers twitched. This armor had problems. Small problems maybe, but problems that could become dangerous. The power feedback could burn out the whole system. Or worse, it could hurt whoever wore it. Taman looked around the room. No one was here. No cameras that he could see. He should leave. He should walk away and forget what he saw. But he couldn't. It only took him 20 minutes. He carefully removed the chest plate, adjusted the energy regulator, and reinforced 3 stress points with micro welds from his kit. He tested the connections, made sure everything was stable, and put the plate back. When he was done, the armor looked exactly the same. But now it would work properly. Now it was safe. Taman left the room quickly, his heart pounding. What had he done? He had just broken into some kind of display room and messed with something that was probably important, but it was fixed now. It was better. Whoever owned that armor would be safer. He went back to his workstation and tried to focus on his tasks, but his mind kept going back to the armor. He hoped no one would notice what he'd done. 3 days passed. Taman almost forgot about the armor. He worked his shifts, ate his meals in the human section of the cafeteria, and slept in his cramped room. Life on the flagship was boring but predictable. Then everything changed. Taman was working on a broken cooling unit when the alarm sounded. Not the morning alarm, this was different. This was the security alarm. The lights in the maintenance deck turned red. Armed Draxian soldiers rushed past him, their weapons drawn. Something was very wrong. One of the soldiers stopped in front of Timon. The Draxian was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, with blade-like appendages extending from his arms. His 4 eyes glowed yellow with aggression. "You, human. Come with us," the soldier said in the rough, translated voice that came from the universal translator on Tamin's collar. "What? Why?" "I didn't do anything," Tamin said, his voice shaking. "You are under arrest for defiling sacred property. Move." 2 more soldiers grabbed Tamin's arms. They didn't hurt him, but their grip was like iron. They dragged him out of the maintenance deck and through the corridors. Other aliens stopped to watch. Tamin saw a few other humans in the crowd, their faces full of fear and confusion. They took him to the upper levels of the ship, places he had never been before. The corridors here were wider, cleaner, more grand. They passed through checkpoints guarded by elite soldiers. Finally, they reached a massive door decorated with intricate carvings. The throne room. The doors opened and Tamin was pushed inside. The room was huge, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch up forever. Pillars lined the walls. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat a throne made of black crystal. And on that throne sat Queen Velratha. Tamin had never seen her before. He had heard stories, of course. Everyone in the coalition knew about the Draxian queen. She had ruled for 40 years. She had won wars. She had crushed rebellions. She was not someone you wanted to meet. The queen stood up. She was even taller than the soldiers, nearly 8 feet tall. Her armor, the armor Tamin had fixed, gleamed on her body. Her blade limbs extended, sharp and deadly. Her 4 eyes locked onto Tamin with an intensity that made him want to disappear. "Who fixed my armor?" she roared. Her voice shook the room. "Who dared to touch the sacred armor of my ancestors?" The soldiers threw Tamin to his knees. He looked up at the queen, his mouth dry, his heart hammering in his chest. I did," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The queen stepped down from her throne, each footstep echoing like thunder. She moved toward him slowly, deliberately. When she stood directly in front of him, she looked down with an expression of pure rage. "You confess to this crime?" Tamin swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Majesty. I fixed your armor. I'm sorry. I couldn't help it." The queen's blade limbs quivered with anger. "You couldn't help it? You broke into the royal armory. You put your filthy human hands on armor that has been passed down through my family for 6 generations. And you say you couldn't help it?" Tamin knew he should stay quiet. He knew he should beg for mercy. But the engineer in him couldn't stop talking. "The energy regulator was failing," he said quickly. "The feedback loop would have caused a system burnout. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. I fixed it. I made it safe." The queen went very still. The room fell silent. Every eye was on Tamin. Then the queen spoke, her voice cold and sharp as a blade. "You think you know better than 6 generations of Draxian engineers? You think you, a human, can improve upon the work of my ancestors?" Tamin looked down at the floor. "I don't know about better. I just know it was broken, and now it's not." The queen turned away from him and walked back to her throne. She sat down slowly, her eyes never leaving Tamin. "Bring me HFY," she commanded. Tamin stayed on his knees on the cold floor of the throne room. His legs were starting to hurt, but he didn't dare move. The soldiers stood around him like statues, their weapons ready. The queen sat on her throne, silent and terrifying. Minutes passed. Maybe it was 10 minutes, maybe it was 30. Time felt strange when you were waiting to find out if you were going to die. Finally, the doors opened again. A Draxian entered the throne room, walking with an air of importance. He was shorter than the queen, but still much taller than Tamin. He wore robes that marked him as someone important, probably a scientist or engineer. His 4 eyes studied Tamin with obvious disgust. "You summoned me, Your Majesty?" the Draxian said, bowing low. "HFY. My chief engineer," the queen said. "This human claims he repaired my armor. He says it was broken, that the energy regulator was failing." HFY's eyes widened. He looked at Tamin, then back at the queen. "Your Majesty, that's impossible. I personally inspect your armor every cycle. There was nothing wrong with it." "That's what I thought," the queen said. Her blade limbs tapped against the armrest of her throne. a rhythmic clicking sound that made Taemin's skin crawl. But I want you to check it now. Examine the armor. Tell me what this human did to it. HFY bowed again. Of course, Your Majesty. It will take some time to run a full diagnostic. Then you should start now, the Queen said. Her voice left no room for argument. HFY gestured to some assistants who were waiting by the door. They brought in scanning equipment, setting it up around the Queen's throne. The Queen stood and removed her armor piece by piece, handing each section to the assistants. Underneath, she wore a simple dark bodysuit. Even without the armor, she looked dangerous. Taemin watched as HFY and his team worked. They placed each piece of armor under scanners, studied the readings on their tablets, and whispered to each other in the Draxian language. Taemin's translator collar picked up some of the words, but not all of them. He caught phrases like energy distribution and structural integrity and impossible readings. The examination took over an hour. Taemin's knees were numb now. His back ached from kneeling for so long, but he stayed still and quiet. He had learned one thing working on alien ships. When you're in trouble, don't make it worse by complaining. Finally, HFY stood up from where he had been studying a display screen. His face had changed. He looked confused now and maybe a little scared. He walked slowly to the Queen and bowed. Your Majesty, I have completed the analysis, he said. And? The Queen's voice was sharp with impatience. The human did modify your armor. He adjusted the energy regulator, repositioned the power distribution nodes, and reinforced 3 stress points in the chest plate. HFY paused, as if he didn't want to say the next part. The modifications are effective. Effective? The Queen repeated. More than effective, Your Majesty. The armor's performance has improved by 43%. Energy distribution is now perfectly balanced. The stress points that were beginning to form microfractures have been stabilized. The work is... He seemed to struggle with the word. Masterful. The throne room went silent. Taemin looked up at the Queen, surprised. She was staring at HFY with an expression that was hard to read. Was she angry? Confused? Both? You're telling me, the Queen said slowly, that this human in less than an hour improved armor that has been maintained by our best engineers for 6 generations? Yes, Your Majesty. That appears to be what happened. The Queen turned her gaze to Taemin. He felt pinned by those 4 eyes like an insect under glass. How? She asked. How did you do this? Taemin's throat was dry. I looked at it. I saw what was wrong. And I fixed it. You saw what was wrong, the Queen repeated. Something that HFY, who has studied engineering for 30 years, did not see. Something that generations of Draxian experts did not see. You saw this in a glance? I guess so, Taemin said. He knew how it sounded. Like he was bragging. But it was the truth. I'm good at fixing things. It's what I do. HFY made a sound that might have been a snort. Your Majesty, with respect, we only have the human's word that there was anything wrong to begin with. Perhaps he simply made unnecessary modifications to justify his crime. The Queen looked at her chief engineer. You said the stress points were beginning to form microfractures. Were they dangerous? HFY hesitated. They could have become dangerous, eventually. Perhaps in another few years the damage might have what? The Queen interrupted. Might have failed during battle? Might have gotten me killed? Your Majesty, the probability was very low, but not 0. The Queen stood up from her throne. She walked to where her armor was laid out on examination tables. She touched the chest plate gently, almost lovingly. This armor saved my mother's life at the siege of Kalthor. She wore it when the assassin's blade struck her chest. The armor held and she lived. My grandmother wore it before her in the wars of unification. She turned back to face the throne room. And you're telling me that all this time it has been slowly failing? That if I had worn it into real combat it might have killed me? HFY looked down at the floor. I apologize, Your Majesty. Our maintenance protocols should have caught these issues. But they didn't, the Queen said. A human caught them. A human who has been on this ship for less than 4 months. A human from a species we consider primitive. She walked back to Taemin, each step deliberate. She stopped right in front of him, so close he could have reached out and touched her. Not that he would. He valued his hand. Stand up, she commanded. Taemin stood on shaky legs. His knees screamed in protest after kneeling for so long. He was barely as tall as the Queen's shoulder. You broke into my armory, the Queen said. You touched sacred relics without permission. You modified property that belongs to the royal family. These crimes normally carry a death sentence. Taemin's heart sank. He had hoped that fixing the armor might save him. Apparently not. However, the Queen continued, you also saved my life. You fixed a problem that could have killed me. That complicates things. She began to pace, her blade limbs folded against her back. I cannot simply execute you. That would be wasteful. Clearly you have skills that are valuable, but I also cannot let this crime go unpunished. My court would see it as weakness. Other humans might think they can break our laws without consequence. She stopped pacing and looked at Taemin again. So I will give you a choice. Actually, no. Not a choice. A challenge. Taemin weighted his stomach tight with fear. There are 10 pieces of equipment in my military storage. The Queen said, all of them are broken. All of them have been examined by our best engineers and declared beyond repair. Some have been broken for years. Some for decades. I want you to fix them. All of them? Taemin asked. All of them. You will have 7 days. If you succeed, your crime will be forgiven. You will be free to return to your duties, and we will speak no more of this incident. The Queen's eyes narrowed. But if you fail to fix even one item, you will be executed. Do you understand? Taemin understood perfectly. This wasn't really a challenge. This was a death sentence with extra steps. If these items were declared unfixable by Draxian engineers, what chance did he have? But what choice did he have? He could refuse and die now, or accept and maybe die in 7 days. At least the second option gave him a week. I understand, he said. I'll do it. Good. The Queen gestured to the guards. Take him to Workshop 7. Bring the equipment from Storage Unit 12. He may have basic tools, but nothing else. No assistance. No communication with other humans. If he tries to leave the workshop or contact anyone, kill him immediately. The guards grabbed Taemin's arms again. As they started to drag him toward the door, the Queen spoke once more. Human. What is your name? Taemin looked back at her. Taemin, Your Majesty. My name is Taemin. Taemin, she repeated as if testing how the name felt in her mouth. 7 days, Taemin. Fix my equipment and you live. Fail and you die. It's that simple. The guards pulled him out of the throne room. The doors closed behind him with a heavy boom that sounded very final. As they walked through the corridors, Taemin's mind was already working. 10 pieces of broken equipment. 7 days, no help. No resources beyond basic tools. It should have been impossible. Any sane person would have been terrified. But Taemin felt something else stirring inside him. Not fear, excitement. He was going to fix things. That's what he did best. That's what he loved. If he was going to die in 7 days, at least he would die doing what he was born to do. The guards brought him to a large workshop in one of the mid-level sections of the ship. It was a good space, clean, well-lit, with sturdy workbenches. A few minutes later, other guards brought in the broken equipment on hover carts. Taemin looked at the items as they were unloaded. A shield generator with a cracked casing, a plasma rifle with a burned-out core, a navigation computer with a shattered display, a medical pod with corrupted circuits, and more. All of it looked ancient, damaged, and completely unfixable. Perfect. The guards left, sealing the door behind them. Taemin was alone with 10 impossible problems and 7 days to solve them. He cracked his knuckles, picked up a scanner from the tool bench, and walked to the first item. Okay, he said to himself in co. The first night was the hardest. Taemin worked until his eyes burned and his hands cramped. The shield generator alone took him 6 hours just to understand. Draxian technology was beautiful but strange. Everything connected in ways that seemed backwards to his human brain. He took apart the shield generator piece by piece, laying each component on the workbench in careful order. The crack in the casing was obvious, but that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was inside. 3 burnt circuit boards and a power regulator that had melted into slag. Taemin studied the burnt parts under a magnifier. What had caused this much damage? It must have been a massive power surge. He traced the circuits with his finger, following the paths, understanding the logic. Then he saw it. A design flaw. The power intake valve had no limiter. Someone had pushed too much energy through the shield, and it had burned out from the inside. The shield hadn't failed. It had been overloaded. Could he fix it? Not the way the Draxians would. They would want to replace every burnt component with an exact match. But Taemin didn't have replacement parts. He had to improvise. He spent the next 4 hours rewiring the circuits, bypassing the burnt sections, and creating a makeshift power limiter using parts from his own toolkit. It wasn't pretty. It wouldn't make a Draxian engineer happy. But when he finally powered on the shield generator, it hummed to life. A shimmer of blue energy formed in the air above the device. It worked. Taman let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. 1 down, 9 to go. He moved on to the plasma rifle. This one had a different problem. The core was cracked, leaking plasma residue. Plasma was dangerous stuff. One wrong move and the whole rifle could explode. Taman handled it carefully using insulated gloves and a containment field. The crack was small but deep. He couldn't weld it. The heat would cause the core to detonate. He couldn't seal it with standard methods. So he did something crazy. He used a biological resin he found in the medical supplies cabinet. The resin was meant for sealing wounds, but it was stable at high temperatures and could bond with metal. He carefully applied the resin to the crack, layer by layer, letting each layer cure before adding the next. It took all night. By the time dawn light started filtering through the workshop's high windows, the core was sealed. He ran a diagnostic, no leaks. Pressure stable, 2 down. Taman collapsed on the floor and fell asleep right there, too tired to even make it to the small cot in the corner of the workshop. He woke up 3 hours later to the sound of the door opening. He jerked awake, scrambling to his feet. A guard entered carrying a tray of food. The guard set it down on the workbench without a word and left. Taman looked at the food. Some kind of purple protein bar and a container of water. It wasn't much, but his stomach was growling. He ate quickly and got back to work. The navigation computer was next. This one was tricky because it wasn't just broken, it was ancient. The technology was at least 50 years old, maybe more. Some of the components didn't even exist anymore. Taman had to figure out what each part did and how it connected to the others. He worked methodically, testing each circuit, each connection. The main problem was the display. It was completely shattered. But underneath the display, the computer itself was still functional. He bypassed the broken display and rigged up a connection to output the data to a portable screen instead. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. The navigation computer booted up, showing a star map from decades ago. Taman smiled. 3 down, 7 to go, 4 days left. On the 3rd day, Jiwoo found a way to send him a message. He discovered it when he opened his toolkit and found a tiny note tucked inside. It was written in Korean in handwriting he recognized. Tae-min, everyone knows what's happening. We're all worried. Please be careful. No one expects you to actually fix all of this. The Queen is just making an example of you. Try to escape. I can help. Jiwoo Tae-min read the note 3 times. Jiwoo was right to be worried. This was an impossible task. But escape? Where would he go? They were on a spaceship in the middle of nowhere. And even if he could escape, what about the other humans on the ship? Would the Queen punish them for his actions? No, he couldn't run. He had to finish this. He tucked the note back into his toolkit and kept working. The medical pod was the most complicated item yet. It wasn't just broken. It had corrupted AI. The artificial intelligence that was supposed to run diagnostic scans and medical procedures had gone insane. When Taman tried to boot it up, the display showed gibberish and the pod made horrible screeching sounds. Taman spent an entire day just trying to access the AI core. When he finally got in, he found the problem. The AI had been learning for decades, accumulating data, but no one had ever cleaned its memory banks. It was drowning in its own information, unable to process anything new. He carefully deleted the corrupted files, keeping only the essential medical databases. Then he rewrote some of the basic learning protocols, giving the AI clear boundaries. When he rebooted the pod this time, it hummed peacefully. The display showed a simple message: Medical pod online. Awaiting patient. 4 down. That night, Taman had visitors. Not guards this time. 3 Draxian engineers entered the workshop, led by HFY. The chief engineer looked around at the repaired equipment with an expression that was hard to read. So it's true, HFY said. You're actually fixing them. Tae-min stood up from where he'd been working on the next item. Yes, I'm halfway done. HFY walked to the shield generator and examined it. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands, studied the modifications Tae-min had made. His face twisted with disgust. This is not proper engineering, HFY said. You've butchered it. These circuits are exposed. This power limiter is held together with adhesive. This is garbage. It works, Tae-min said simply. Working is not enough. Kethavor snapped. Engineering is an art. It should be beautiful, efficient, perfect. This is improvisation. This is the work of a scavenger, not an engineer. One of the other Draxian engineers spoke up. But Kethavor, the shield generator was declared unfixable. We examined it ourselves. We said it was impossible to repair without a full replacement of the core components. Because it is impossible to repair properly, Kethavor said. He gestured at Taemin's work. This human hasn't repaired it. He's made a crude approximation, a temporary fix that will probably fail within a few months. Will it fail? The third engineer asked. Kethavor went quiet. He examined the shield generator again, running his own scanner over it. The silence stretched out. No, Kethavor finally admitted. According to these readings, it's stable. It might even last years. He looked at Taemin with open hostility. But that doesn't make it right. You're violating every principle of proper engineering. Taemin had stayed quiet during this, but now he spoke. I'm fixing things with what I have. That's what humans do. We don't always have the perfect parts or the right tools. We make do. Make do? Kethavor's blade limbs extended slightly, a sign of agitation. Is that how humans see engineering? As just making do? Sometimes, Taemin said. Sometimes that's all you can do. And sometimes making do is enough. Kethavor stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked toward the door. The Queen should not have given you this chance. You don't deserve it. The other two engineers followed him out. As they left, one of them looked back at Taemin with an expression that might have been curiosity. Or maybe respect. It was hard to tell with Draxian faces. When they were gone, Taemin sat down heavily on his workbench. His hands were shaking. He'd thought they came to help, or at least to observe. Instead, they came to criticize. To tell him he was doing it wrong, but he wasn't doing it wrong. He was doing it differently. That was the whole point. He looked at the remaining 6 items waiting to be fixed. 4 days left. He'd need to work faster. Taemin didn't sleep that night. He moved from one item to the next, his hands working almost automatically. The communication array, the weapon targeting system, the environmental suit with torn seals. Each one was a puzzle. Each one had a solution if he looked hard enough. By the morning of the 5th day, he had 7 items fixed. 3 to go, but he was running out of time, and the last 3 were the worst. A power core from an old dreadnought that had been dead for decades, an emergency stasis pod that wouldn't activate, and something that looked like a personal defense shield, small enough to wear on your belt. Taemin started with the stasis pod. It was important. Stasis pods saved lives. The problem was in the initialization sequence. Something in the startup code was corrupted. He spent hours going through line after line of code, finding the errors, fixing them one by one. By midday, the stasis pod hummed to life. 8 down. The personal shield was next. It was small, delicate, and completely dead. No power, no response. Taemin took it apart and found the problem immediately. The entire power cell had corroded. Not just damaged, completely eaten away by time and chemical reaction. He couldn't fix corrosion. He needed a new power cell. But where would he get one? Taemin looked around the workshop. He had his toolkit. He had parts from the other repairs. And he looked down at his universal translator collar. The collar had its own power cell. A small one, but maybe enough. He hesitated. Without the translator, he wouldn't be able to understand. The power core sat on the workbench like a dead heart. Taemin circled it slowly, studying it from every angle. It was old. Really old. The metal was scarred and pitted. The connection ports were corroded. Even the casing was cracked in places. This wasn't just broken. This was ancient history. Taemin ran a scanner over it. No readings, no energy signature at all. It was completely dead. He tried to access the diagnostic port, but there was no response. Whatever had killed this power core, it had killed it thoroughly. He sat down and stared at it. For the first time since this challenge began, he felt truly stuck. With the other items, he could see the problem. He could trace the fault, understand what went wrong, figure out a fix, but this was like trying to bring something back from the dead. Taemin's mind drifted to his childhood. He was 8 years old, sitting in his mother's repair shop in Busan. She was teaching him how to fix an old television that someone had brought in. Taemin, what do you do when something is too broken? His mother had asked. Throw it away and get a new one? He'd answered. His mother had smiled. That's what most people do. But we're not most people. When something is too broken, You don't look at what's broken. You look at what still works. You find the one part that's still alive and you build from there. Taemin opened his eyes. What still works? He started taking the power core apart. Not all at once, that would be dangerous. But piece by piece, layer by layer. He removed the outer casing. Then the secondary shielding. Then the tertiary containment. At the center of the power core he found it. A tiny crystal no bigger than his thumbnail. It was the reactor seed, the heart of the power core. And it was still glowing. Just barely. The faintest whisper of light, but it was there. It was alive. Taemin felt excitement surge through him. This was it. This was what still worked. Everything else could be replaced or rebuilt. But if the reactor seed was still active, even minimally, he had something to work with. The problem was that the reactor seed was essentially in hibernation. It needed a massive surge of energy to wake it up, to restart the fusion reaction that would power the core. But where would he get that much energy? He looked around the workshop. He had the shield generator. That had some power. He had the medical pod. The navigation computer. Could he link them all together? Create a network that could deliver enough energy to jumpstart the reactor seed? It was risky. Really risky. If he miscalculated, the energy surge could cause an explosion. Or it could burn out the reactor seed completely, and then it would be truly dead. But he had to try. Taemin spent the next 6 hours building a power network. He ran cables from every working device in the workshop. He created a focus point using parts from his toolkit and scraps from the other repairs. He built a system that would take energy from multiple sources and channel it all into the reactor seed in one precise burst. It was the most complicated thing he'd ever built. When he was finished, cables and wires covered the workshop floor like a spider web. The reactor seed sat at the center, surrounded by focusing lenses and energy directors. Taemin double-checked every connection. Then he checked them again. His hands were steady, but inside his heart was racing. This was it, all or nothing. He took a deep breath and activated the network. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the devices around the workshop began to glow. Energy flowed through the cables, converging on the focus point. The reactor seed started to pulse brighter and brighter. Taemin watched the readings on his scanner. Energy levels rising, temperature increasing. The reactor seed was waking up. Then something went wrong. One of the cables started sparking. Too much resistance. The energy flow was backing up. Taemin jumped forward and grabbed the cable with his bare hand. Pain shot through his arm as electricity coursed through him, but he held on. He twisted the cable, adjusting the connection, forcing the energy to flow correctly. The sparking stopped. The energy surged forward into the reactor seed. There was a bright flash of light. Taemin was thrown backward, landing hard on the floor. For a moment he couldn't see anything. His vision was full of white spots, then his vision cleared. He sat up slowly, his arm numb and tingling. He looked at the power core. It was glowing, a steady, strong light emanating from within. The displays on its casing showed active readings. Energy output stable. All systems functional. The power core was alive. Taemin started laughing. He couldn't help it. He'd done it. All 10 items. All repaired. With hours to spare. He lay back on the floor, still laughing, his whole body aching with exhaustion. Then he closed his eyes and fell asleep right there, surrounded by his jury-rigged power network and 10 impossible repairs. He woke up to the sound of the workshop door opening. Guards entered, followed by HFY and several other Draxian engineers. And behind them, Queen Velaratha herself. Taemin scrambled to his feet. He tried to bow but almost fell over. His legs were still weak from the electric shock. The Queen looked around the workshop. Her 4 eyes took in everything. The repaired equipment, the cables everywhere, the scorch marks on the floor from where the power surge had hit. "You finished," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Your Majesty," Taemin said. His voice was hoarse. He realized he hadn't spoken out loud in days. The Queen walked to the power core. She placed one hand on it, feeling the energy humming within. "This has been dead for 57 years. My grandmother's ship used this core. When it failed, 300 crew members died before they could be rescued. We kept it as a memorial to their sacrifice." She turned to look at Taemin. "And you brought it back to life." "I just found the part that wasn't dead yet," Taemin said. "And built from there." The Queen gestured to HFY. "Examine them. All of them. I want a full report." HFY and his team spread out through the workshop, scanning and testing each repaired item. Taman watched nervously. What if something didn't work? What if he'd missed something? But as the minutes passed, HFY's expression grew darker and darker. Not with anger, with something else. Maybe disbelief, maybe frustration. Finally, HFY approached the Queen and bowed. "Your Majesty, I have completed the examination, and all 10 items are functional. The repairs are unconventional. Many of them violate standard engineering protocols, but they work." HFY's voice was tight. "The human has succeeded." A murmur went through the other Draxian engineers. The Queen raised one blade limb for silence. "Unconventional," the Queen repeated. "Explain." HFY gestured to the shield generator. He used medical resin to seal a plasma leak. Medical resin. On a weapon. That should not work. But it does. He pointed to the navigation computer. He bypassed the entire display system because he couldn't fix it. Instead of repairing the display, he just went around it. That's not repair. That's improvisation. He walked to the power core. And this should have been impossible. The core has been dead for decades. To restart it required a power surge that should have destroyed the reactor seed. But somehow he calculated the exact amount of energy needed. He built a network from spare parts and functioning devices. He created something that shouldn't exist. HFY turned to face the Queen. "Your Majesty, this human does not follow the rules of engineering. He breaks them. He ignores centuries of established protocols. He works like someone who learned to fix things out of necessity rather than theory," the Queen finished. She looked at Taman with those intense 4 eyes. "Tell me, human, where did you learn to engineer like this?" Taman thought back to his mother's shop, to the years of fixing whatever came through the door with whatever parts they had, to the days after the first contact war, when Earth was rebuilding and everyone had to make do with broken pieces. "I learned from my mother," he said. "She ran a repair shop in Busan. We fixed everything, computers, appliances, tools, vehicles. Whatever people brought us. We didn't always have the right parts. We didn't have fancy equipment. We just had to make things work." "And your formal training?" HFY asked. "What academy did you attend?" "No academy," Taman said. "I learned by doing. By breaking things and putting them back together. By making mistakes and figuring out why they were mistakes." HFY looked horrified. "No academy? No formal education? Your Majesty, this explains everything. He has no foundation in proper engineering principles. He's just guessing." "And yet his guesses work," the Queen said. She walked closer to Taman. "You have fulfilled your challenge, human. I gave you my word that if you succeeded, your crime would be forgiven. I am a queen of my word." Taman felt relief wash over him. He'd done it. He was going to live. "However," the Queen continued, and Taman's relief vanished, "I have another proposal for you." "Your Majesty?" Taman asked carefully. "You have shown me something interesting these past 7 days. You have shown me that the Draxian Empire, with all our technology and knowledge, has blind spots. We have items that we declared unfixable, but they were not unfixable. We simply couldn't see how to fix them because we were trapped by our own rules." The Queen gestured around the workshop. "You are not trapped by our rules. You see solutions we cannot see. You work in ways we cannot work. That makes you valuable." She paused, letting that sink in. "I want you to examine more of our technology. I want you to find the flaws we've missed. The weaknesses." 3 months passed. The workshop that had been Taman's prison became his domain. The Queen kept her word. She gave him access to nearly everything, and she let him bring in other human engineers to help. Jiwoo was the first one he requested. When she walked into the workshop and saw him alive, she actually hugged him. Taman was surprised. Jiwoo had always been the serious professional type, but she held him tight for a moment before stepping back, her eyes wet. "You idiot," she said in Korean. "We all thought you were dead. No one survives a challenge from the Queen." "I'm special," Taemin said with a tired smile. "You're insane," Jiwoo corrected, but she was smiling too. After Jiwoo came Dong Hyun, a systems specialist who had been working on the engine deck. Then Youngjae, who understood weapons better than anyone Taemin had ever met. Then Bora, a materials expert. And finally Hyunwoo, who was barely 20 but had an instinct for finding problems in code. The 5 of them transformed the workshop into something new. It wasn't just a repair station anymore. It was a research lab, a testing ground, a place where human and Draxian technology met and sometimes created something neither species had imagined. HFY hated every minute of it. He visited the workshop at least once a week, always finding something to criticize. The humans were too loud, too messy, too casual with important equipment. They ate at their workbenches. They played music while they worked. They laughed and joked like they were at a party instead of handling military technology. But even HFY couldn't deny the results. In 3 months, Taemin's team had improved 17 different systems. They'd found design flaws in fighter shields, navigation arrays, and weapons targeting. They'd made the flagship's energy distribution 40% more efficient. They'd even redesigned the water recycling system to work better. The Queen was pleased. More than pleased, she was impressed. She started sending them bigger challenges. More complex systems, things that the Draxian military had struggled with for years. It was during one of these challenges that Taemin discovered something troubling. He was working on a power distribution system from one of the fleet's destroyers. The system kept having power spikes that damaged other equipment. Young Jay had brought it to him, saying it seemed familiar somehow. Taemin took it apart and immediately saw the problem. It was the same design flaw that had been in the Queen's armor. The same controlled weakness that caused power feedback. But this was more severe. This was dangerous, he called the others over. Look at this, he said, pointing to the circuit board. See this regulator placement? It's deliberately inefficient. It's designed to fail under stress. Why would anyone design it like that? Bora asked. I think it's a safety feature, Jiwoo said, studying the schematic on her tablet. If the equipment is captured by enemies, the power spikes would damage it. Make it useless, but that doesn't make sense anymore, Donghyun said. This isn't captured equipment. This is on their own ships, and it's causing damage to their own systems. Taemin felt a cold realization settle over him. How old is this destroyer? Young Jae checked his notes. 43 years. One of the older ships in the fleet. And the Queen's armor? Taemin asked. Over 100 years old, Jiwoo said. Taemin stood up and walked to the data terminal. He pulled up schematics for various Draxian military equipment, ships, weapons, armor, everything he had access to. He started comparing designs, looking for the same flaw. The others watched him work, sensing that something important was happening. After an hour, Taemin stepped back from the terminal. It's everywhere, he said quietly. Every piece of military equipment older than 30 years has this flaw. Not exactly the same design, but the same principle. Controlled weaknesses built into critical systems. That's insane, Young Jae said. Why would they do that? It made sense at the time, Hyunwoo said. He was the youngest, but sometimes he saw things the others missed. The Draxian Empire was constantly at war back then. They were fighting multiple species. If their technology was captured, they wanted it to fail. It was smart military strategy. But the wars ended, Jiwoo said, understanding. The Empire stopped fighting so many enemies, and they never removed the failsafes. Because no one remembered they were there, Taemin said. Generations of engineers maintained the equipment, following the original designs, never questioning why things were built that way. The safety features became death traps. Bora looked worried. How many ships have this problem? I don't know, Taemin said, but I need to find out. He requested a meeting with the Queen. That was something he could do now. As her chief innovation engineer, he had direct access to her. It was strange going from a prisoner facing execution to someone who could request an audience with royalty. The meeting was scheduled for the next day. Taemin spent the night preparing his report, gathering all the data he'd found. Jiwoo helped him organize it into a presentation that would make sense to the Queen and her military advisors. When morning came, Taemin walked to the throne room. He was nervous but determined. This was important. This was bigger than fixing individual items. This was about the safety of the entire fleet. The throne room was more crowded than last time. The Queen sat on her throne wearing the armor Taemin had fixed. Around her stood members of her military council, admirals, generals, and senior engineers, including HFY. Taemin, the Queen said, you requested this meeting with some urgency. What have you discovered? Taemin took a deep breath. Your Majesty, I've found a serious problem. It's in your military equipment. Almost all of it. Murmurs went through the council. Kethvor stepped forward. That's a serious accusation, human. Do you have proof? Yes, Taman said. He activated the holographic display he'd brought. Images of circuit designs floated in the air, showing the flaws he'd found. These are controlled weaknesses, safety features that were built into Draxian technology decades ago. They were designed to make equipment fail if it was captured by enemies. I know about these, an admiral said. They're part of our standard security protocols. They were, Taman corrected. But they're not safe anymore. The wars they were designed for ended 30 years ago. But the weaknesses remain. And now they're causing failures in your own equipment on your own ships, hurting your own people. He showed them the data, the power spikes, the system failures, the cascading damage that happened when stressed systems hit their built-in breaking points. The Queen's armor had this problem. The power core I repaired had this problem. And according to my analysis, 70% of your military fleet has ships with this same issue. The throne room went silent. The Queen leaned forward, her 4 eyes fixed on the display. 70%? She said quietly. Yes, Your Majesty. Maybe more. I've only been able to examine a small sample, but the pattern is clear. Every ship, every weapon system, every piece of equipment over 30 years old likely has these built-in weaknesses. Kethvor looked at the data, his expression troubled. But we maintain everything. We follow all protocols. How did we miss this? Because you were following the original designs, Taman said. You were maintaining the equipment exactly as it was built. No one questioned whether the designs themselves were flawed. This is catastrophic, another admiral said. If an enemy discovered these weaknesses, they wouldn't need to discover them, Jiwoo said. She had come with Taman to help with the technical explanations. The weaknesses are already causing damage. During battle, when systems are stressed, they fail. You've probably lost ships to this without knowing it. The Queen stood up from her throne. Admiral Raxthar, how many ships have we lost in the past 10 years to unexplained system failures? The Admiral consulted his datapad. 43, Your Majesty. The official reports listed various causes. Power core malfunctions, shield failures, navigation errors. And how many of those ships were over 30 years old? The Admiral's face went pale. All of them, Your Majesty. The Queen turned to Taman. Can this be fixed? Yes, Taman said. But it's a massive job. Every affected system needs to be examined and modified. It will take time. Months, maybe years for the entire fleet. How many engineers would you need? Taman thought about it. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Both human and Draxian. We need humans for the problem solving. But we need Draxians who understand the original designs. Kethvor spoke up. Your Majesty, with respect, we cannot put humans in charge of our entire fleet. The security risk alone is nothing compared to the risk we have right now, the Queen interrupted. We have been flying ships with built-in death traps for decades. We have been losing crews, losing battles, and we never even knew why. She looked at Kethvor. The human found this in 3 months. How long have you been chief engineer? Kethvor said nothing. The Queen turned back to Taman. You will have your engineers, both human and Draxian. You will form teams to examine every ship, every system, every weapon. You will find these flaws and fix them. Whatever resources you need, you will have. Thank you, Your Majesty, Taman said, bowing. Don't thank me, the Queen said. You've just given yourself an impossible job. Fixing 10 items in 7 days was easy compared to this. She was right. Taman knew she was right. But as he looked at the data,